When you strike it and you hit it, it is the most incredibly electric feeling you will ever have. It is the most familiar, unfamiliar feeling you will ever have. You will swear that you are ancient in that moment. You will feel it in every single cell of your body. And I mean like a vibration, a coherence where your body becomes electric. If you close your eyes and you begin to think about doing something, you're an athlete, you understand this. If you're a background in football and you are running a pattern or you are doing something, you would rehearse it in your mind. Yeah. Turns out that the act of mentally rehearsing something when you're truly present, your brain does not know the difference between what's going on out there and what's going on in here. In fact, your brain will begin to look like you've been doing it for the last 5 days and you've never run the course. So now your brain is no longer a record of the past, because typically it is. Now it's a map to the future. So now you're priming your brain. So that became the very platform. You know, experiments with piano players. You know, you take a group of people that never played the piano before, you divide them into 2 different categories. You take one group of people, you teach them one-handed scales and chords. You do a brain scan on them. They come and practice for 2 hours a day for 5 days. At the end of 5 days, if you rescan the brain, they grow new circuits on the opposite side of the brain. Nothing magical there. You learn something new. Learning's making new connections. Get some instruction. You get instruction. You get your body involved. Get your body involved. You're going to have an experience. Experience enriches the brain. Pay attention to what you're doing. You've got to pay attention and repeat it, firing and wiring. You're going to assemble new circuits. You can take the other group of people, have them come for 2 hours a day for 5 days, do a brain scan before, the brain scan after. Have them close their eyes and mentally rehearse playing those scales and chords. At the end of 5 days, they'll grow the same amount of circuits in their brain as the people who actually physically demonstrated the action. What does that mean? It means not only do they change their brain by thinking differently, but their brain looks like they've been playing the piano for 5 days. Now set them in front of a piano. Never played the piano before. They'll play those scales and chords because their brain is wired to play it. So now, the act of rehearsing who they're going to be, what are the qualities, and beginning to get in this creative state, began to lay down the circuits of a new personality. And a new personality is connected to a new personal reality. So the next question is, does that change the body? Take a group of men, have them do one-handed curls in their mind, and bring an emotional component like stronger, harder, more intense. 1 hour a day for 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, 13.5 increase in muscle strength. Wow. Never lifted a weight. Now their body is changing by thought alone.
This is fascinating because, you know, growing up in this religion that I grew up, it was a constant reminder, a daily practice to think in a certain way, to think that you can never be physically harmed, that you're infinite love, that you're infinite light, your infinite soul, spirit, life, truth, and love, right? It was like constantly taught to me that I'm never able to get physically harmed. And that if you are, that means your thought is off, and you just have to recorrect your thought and you'll have a healing, right? It's a little extreme for some because, and if you're not, you know, well practiced in it, and if you don't know how to really manage the thoughts and train, then you can hurt yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
You can really hurt your body, and that's, you know, it happened. Right? Yeah. It happened for times. But I use this, you know, philosophy, strategy, technique, idea in sports. And I would rehearse constantly, like you talked about. I was constantly rehearsing the games, what I wanted to create for the season, for my body, for my life. And it just seemed like it would always happen. And I remember I would watch game film of world record holders in track and field and football, and watch them every single night and mentally rehearse the same movements they would have before I would fall asleep. And then I'd practice the next day. But I was constantly rehearsing in my mind how I wanted to show up. I was rehearsing this moment. You know, in my life, 10 years ago, I was rehearsing what I'd be doing this year in my life.
If you're living by those elevated states and you know how to feel that emotion of your future before it happens, you're less likely to wait for it to happen because you'll feel like it already happened. You're less likely to try to control it. You'll know that the moment you lose the feeling, you just disconnected, and you're going to make your way back. And when you get good at it, no person, no thing, no experience can take it away from you. Wow. Now you're empowered. And if you understand the laws of how creation happens, then you're less likely to compete and rush to get what you want. You're going to know that it's going to come to you. And now that's the new model of how we create. Now people say to me, well, I'm this way because of that person and that thing, I would say to them, so you mean then that person or that experience out there is controlling your thoughts and feelings? Oh, that means you're a victim to your environment. But when you start changing your thoughts and feelings and it starts to produce an effect in your environment, you're going to change the belief that you're a victim, consciously or subconsciously, of your life to becoming more of a creator of your life. And now all of a sudden you become more a creator of your life. You can't blame anybody. You can't say, well, that person or that thing. You'd have to say, I got to be greater than that environmental condition. Who in history can I study that had the same challenges? What did they do? Let me just work that into my rehearsal so that I can improve, right? Just like you've done with sports. It's the same process.
Yeah. When do you experience the most love?
Ooh,
personally.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it turns out that the signature of the quantum field is greater and greater degrees of oneness and wholeness, right? So think about it. When we live in stress, we live in separation, right? Because our senses fool us into believing you're there and I'm here, and everybody is separate from us, and everything is separate from us. That's 3D reality, right? But as you start opening the center, all of a sudden, when you become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, and no time, right? That's the moment that your consciousness lines up with the consciousness of the field. That's when you are totally present. Now, here's the deal. If I can get people to believe that just because they can't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist, if they can just connect and pay attention to that field and stay present with it and become more aware of it, moment after moment after moment, every interaction with that invisible field, every experience lays down new circuits in their brain for them to perceive more of it, right? So then as they keep their attention on it, they start moving closer and closer to it, so they experience less separation and more oneness and wholeness. So then when that happens, there's a cascade of all kinds of physical and chemical and energetic things that begin to happen. So for me, the best way that I can describe that field is intelligent love. It's greater levels of order and unity and oneness. And when you strike it and you hit it, it is the most incredibly electric feeling you will ever have. It is the most familiar, unfamiliar feeling you will ever have. You will swear that you are ancient in that moment, and you will connect. And it won't be just like love for your puppy. You will feel it in every single cell of your body. And I mean like a vibration, a coherence where your body becomes electric. And the only way we can describe that is love. You taste that one time.
You want it all the time.
Well, here's what I say. I always say, the first time it happened to me, and every time since, when I come back to my senses, I always say the same thing. Joe Dispenza, you got this all wrong. Because some veneer, some conditioning is lifted. You start realizing that the way you think life isn't that way. Do I react in my life? Yep, I do. But the question is, how long are you going to react? That's the real question. Because if you keep that emotional reaction going on for an extended period of time, sooner or later it'll become your identity. And then people say, why are you so bitter? Why are you so frustrated? Why are you suffering so much? In your brain, in that emotion, you're in the emotion, which means you're in the chemical residue of the past, is going to call up the event because you're emotionally connected to it. And you're going to say, I'm this way because of that past experience. So then, imagine what I do with people. We have people that have been abused. We have people that have been traumatized, that have been assaulted. We have people that have had very, very difficult pasts. And have you ever heard me say to revisit the event? Have you ever heard me say that? Never do we need to revisit the event, because once you do, you open the box. But what we want to do is overcome the emotion, because that's just what's lasting from the event. So you sit a person down, and the moment you sit them down, what do you think the body is going to do?
It's going to look for something to recreate that emotion because that's the person's identity. Are you with me still?
Yes.
So if I make the person, if I inspire the person to sit there, and they're sitting there and all of a sudden they're noticing that they're hot and they're irritated and their stomach is twisting, and all of a sudden it's a group of sensations, a group of feelings that they have called all along frustration. But the different sensations, the moment you name it, it becomes an emotion. But what it is just bodily sensations. It's energy that's stuck in the body. So the body is looking to go back to the past. It's believing it's in the past. Are you with me still? So if the person becomes aware that their body is doing that, and like training an animal, allow the body to feel that emotion and then settle it down into the present moment. When you settle it down into the present moment, the body starts to trust the present moment and move out of the past. And there's a release of energy. Then the body goes, well, wait a second, what's going to happen in the next moment? And it starts doing that. And it starts to try and anticipate the future. And you settle the body back down into the present moment. And every time you do that, you're telling the body it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind, and your will is getting greater than the program. And all of a sudden, you start to lower the volume to that emotion. And when you begin to break the addiction to that emotion, the side effect of breaking that addiction is called joy. It's called freedom. All of a sudden, the body's saying, I don't want to be tormented anymore. Now, does that mean you shouldn't grieve over things that you lose? Grieving is a biological process. It's neural pruning. It's a death of circuitry. It's a death of emotions. It's the absence, a void of something in your life. And that's important, but in grief, sooner or later, you got to come to a greater understanding about death, a greater understanding about loss, a greater understanding so that you can adapt to those conditions. Every time I sit with someone and they start complaining about their life, and I let them go for a few minutes, and then I go, oh! You know what I say to them? You only complain about your life when it's not working. And the emotion that you're feeling right now is keeping you connected to the past. You never do this when your life is working. And so I don't have a problem with moving through the stages of emotions. But I also know that what a person really wants more than anything else is to be free. People want to be free. And I have witnessed transformation on every culture, on every skin color, every shape, every size, every age. I've witnessed it. And the same radiance that takes place in a person's face, a light behind their eyes, a different physical presentation of their face is eminent. It's real. And that person has worked to overcome themselves. And so it's not that we shouldn't feel emotions. We should feel those emotions and feel them completely. And like a child, get over it though. And just let it out and then go. When we witness people analyzing their life within some disturbing emotion on the brain scans, over and over again, we saw their brain getting worse. Just worse. And I would go, excuse me, Hector, what the hell were you doing in there? Oh, I was just caught up with my ex and the kids. And well, yeah, I want you to know that that's making your brain worse. And so then when they start reasoning that, and they understand, I'm not going to give them the answer to their problems, because when a person is suffering, what are they looking for? They're looking for me to take them out of their suffering, and I can give them the answer, the correct answer to their problems, and they will argue against me. They will argue the entire time. No, but. And I know what I don't. I just say, take the ride with me. Give me 4 days. Give me 5 days. Cross the river. Get beyond yourself and get beyond that emotion. And the memory without the emotional charge is wisdom. And that's the name of the game. Because the soul can't go to the future. can't create a new adventure, can't journey back to source if you're living by some emotion that's keeping you in the past. The soul doesn't even know what to dream about. It can't, because it's seeing the future through the lens of the past. So then when the person starts coming up against themselves and they're sitting there and you say you create your reality, all right, well then I'm going to have a thought about what I want, but they can't control their thoughts. That's because their body's influencing their mind. So the only way they're going to begin to liberate energy is to be still and to know that they're God, to be greater than their body. And every time they settle it back into the present moment, they're lowering the volume to that emotion. And now they become the mind. And the body is no longer the mind. And when the body is finally free, they'll see possibilities they never saw before. I've seen it too many times. And all of a sudden, all that person wants to do is be in the present moment and become more happy. They want more of that. But living in guilt or grief or shame or unworthiness. I had someone tell me they lost a loved one the other day. And I said, well, okay. How long have you been grieving? Oh, about a year. Oh, really? Okay, well, suppose it was you that left and you were looking at the person you loved moping around for a year. What would you say to them after a year if you truly loved them? Get over it and have a happy life. I'm doing great. You should make yourself happy. You really love me? Live a happy life. That would be the greatest testament of love for each other. Because if you're suffering, then you're making this hard on me. And so then we always have to update our versions about reality, because it's the only way that we adapt. Don't believe everything you've read or heard. It just may not be the truth. There's always a greater truth that you and I can begin to investigate. Surely someone in eternity has had similar problems as you and I, and have gotten beyond it. Yes or no? Yes. So study that person. You want to be wealthy? Study wealthy people. Don't just have some panacea that you're just going to get wealthy. Read about wealthy people and find out that they lost everything and failed miserably 20, 50 times. But what they had as a characteristic, a quality in their personality, is they were persistent. And they kept changing. And they kept forgiving and letting go of the past and kept going. And sooner or later they ran into it. And when they had all the money they wanted, it was never about the money. It was just about that they could prove to themselves that they can do it. And you and I are no different than that. But if you can't create a future because of some emotion that keeps you in the past, you're going to have to square off with that emotion. And when you sit down and your body has all those physical sensations and it's getting vigilant and it wants to get up and it wants to move and you're just going, wow. And you're settling it down and you're working with it, you got to agree with me that something greater in you is climbing out of that body. Something greater in you is awakening. And when you're able to overcome those emotions, truly break the addiction, don't you know that you'll return back to your life and face the person that betrayed you? And you will see a part of yourself that you used to be that you no longer are, and you're not going to have anything else but love for them. In fact, you're going to have compassion for them because you're going to realize how stuck they are, and you're liberated and free. True forgiveness is when you take your attention off somebody because you've overcome the emotion. And that gives them permission to show up differently in your life because you freed yourself and you freed them. And all of a sudden, reality begins to unfold in mysterious ways. And that person shows up and says, forgive me. I was so wrong. And you're over it already. And you're just like, go on with it, man. I'm in a new life. I would have never been in this new life if you didn't betray me. Thank you.
The first 2 years of a child's life, their brainwaves are basically in delta. So they're asleep with their eyes open. And as they begin to interact with their environment, their brainwaves change to theta. And theta is kind of like that twilight state where you have mystical experiences. But the first 6 years of a child's life, They're completely in their subconscious mind because that's what those brainwave patterns do. And as a result of it, all of their attention is on their inner world, feelings. So they have experiences that happen to them. And when the experience happens, they pay attention to their feelings. That's the primary modus for them. And then when they feel altered, they begin to look through their senses outside of them to see who or what caused it. And that event in and of itself is called an associative memory. So for the first 6, 7, 8, 9 years of our lives, as our brainwaves move into alpha and then ultimately into beta, when we get to beta, we're pretty much developed an analytical mind. And the analytical mind then serves as a filter or a barrier to separate the conscious mind from the subconscious mind. But that experience, though, is encoded in a memory system called an implicit memory system. It's stored in our subconscious. So then we don't know why we behave the way we do the rest of our lives because of events that have happened to us, but we're operating at a very fundamental level equal to the emotion that we've experienced. Another way to say that is, the moment you get in situations that bring up similar emotions that have branded you from the past, you return back to that 7-year-old child. And you behave in very, very limited ways because that's all you know, right? No one ever instructed you how to learn and to grow. So then people do all this psychoanalysis and all these different types of therapies, and a lot of times it never gets to the core of it because they never get beyond their analytical mind to make those changes. Does that make sense? So there are techniques and ways to begin to lower the volume of those emotions that literally are stored in that system. And as you begin to lower the volume of those emotions within that system, you begin to restore the system, and the end product is called wisdom. Because a memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom, and that's how we grow and learn. Now, in the work that we've done over and over and over again, that most people, what they do is they have an emotional situation that happens in their life. Emotions are a record of the past. They analyze and think within that emotion, so they're thinking in the past. Are you with me? When we studied their brain waves and we studied their brain functionally, when they're doing that, their brain always gets worse. Their brain gets more out of balance because it's the very hormones of stress that begin to super arouse or cause the brain to become so aroused, heightened. And when the brain is heightened, as I'll talk about this weekend, when you're facing a threat or something in your life that's potentially dangerous, the moment that happens, you begin to anchor consciousness in the body. You become very aware of your body because there's danger out there. You become super aware of objects and things in your environment because there's something dangerous out there. And you begin to obsess about time. And now when you do that, your brainwaves change and all of your attention goes on the outer world because that's where the danger is. Does that make sense? So 70% of the time, people stay in this state. That's a scientific fact. So then, when we've studied people in altered states, we saw that when they're analyzing their life, what do I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? Within the emotion of whatever it is that keeps them anchored to the past, they never really produce a change. But we've seen, without a doubt, over and over again, that when a person goes into an altered state, when they go within, and they become nobody, no one, no thing, no where, and no time, that's the moment they become pure consciousness. That's the moment they're no longer associating in this space and time, and they just walk through the door to the quantum field. Now, that means that in order for you to change your body, if you have a disease, you got to get beyond your body. In order for you to change some aspect of your personality, you got to get beyond the personality and its program. You got to get beyond the someone. If you are going to create something or change something in your life, you got to get beyond your association to known things and places in your life. And if you are going to create some novel event in some future time, you got to get beyond the anticipation of the future based on the past. When people actually do that, when they are pure consciousness, that's the moment the brain literally can change in a matter of seconds, because now the operator is no longer immersed in matter. The operator now is beginning to manipulate matter from a different level of mind. And so people can heal their inner child by doing their inner child work, by overcoming emotions, and it requires a certain amount of consciousness and awareness. It requires a certain amount of metacognition or mindfulness to observe who they're being and begin to modify their behaviors and create new experiences and begin to overcome some of those emotions that keep them anchored to the past. But in order to do it in a very quick way, we've seen this over and over again, that people have to get beyond their body, their environment, and time. That's when they all of a sudden consciousness becomes the epiphenomenon of matter, and a person can have an instantaneous experience that changes them because they're now already in the operating system. And I'll show you some brain scans that will probably floor most of you, because these are not nuns, these are not Buddhist monks, these are not academics, these are not Kabbalistic rabbis. These are common people just like you, doing an uncommon thing. And the amount of energy that we're capturing in their brain we have never seen in a scientific experiment to date, which means that person has having a full-on inner experience that's transcendent of any past experience. They're having such a transcendent moment that the experience in that moment is reorganizing the circuitry in their brain, and the end product of the experience is called an emotion. They're feeling awe and wonder and love and joy, and they're signaling new genes in new ways, and that's the moment the past is literally washed out of the body. And we've seen tumors change, we've seen uterine fibroids go away, we've seen anxiety, depression, we've seen MS, lupus, we've seen it change in one instant when the person literally connects that deeply to the power within them. And that's the moment that the rewiring process can happen instantaneously. Now, that doesn't always happen that way. Other times, you got to stay at it. People who have done our work have done their meditations for 3 years. It took them 3 years to heal their condition. But you know what? They wanted that healing more than their sleep. They wanted that healing more than their social engagements. They wanted that healing more than their morning coffee. They wanted that more than anything else. And they wanted to connect with the divine every single day, and they wanted to drink from a deeper well, and they said, I don't want breakfast, I don't want coffee, I don't want my cell phone, I don't want my internet, I want you, power within me. We have a date, and I am going to commune with you, and I'm going to connect with you, and there's nothing else that matters more in this moment than that. And every day they overcame a little aspect of themselves, surrendered a piece of the limited self to join the greater self. And sure, it was hard, and sure they had doubts, and sure they were uncertain, and sure they didn't feel like it certain days because they were facing a very serious condition. But every day they did it. And after a period of 3 years, and they overcame that disease or that condition or whatever, you ask that person, what about that condition or disease? They'll tell you, it was my greatest teacher. What about your father who was an alcoholic and was abusive? That was my greatest lesson. Because what if you think about your father now? Do you have any charge? No. And I'd say, well, now you have wisdom. Because the memory without the emotional charge is wisdom. And if the soul's job is to embrace the unknown and create new experiences, if we're living by the same emotions, addicted to those emotions every day, how can the soul go on an adventure into the future if it is stuck emotionally to the past? So then positive thinking doesn't work if the person is literally anchored to the past emotionally. And so when people begin to open their hearts, and Greg will talk about this and I'll talk about it, and we've got enormous amount of data to show how powerful you are and how connected you are to the person on the other side of the room when you open your heart, how it affects that person. We've measured this, that you are bound in an invisible field beyond space and time, but not when you're feeling anxious, not when you're feeling angry, not when you're feeling frustrated, not when you're judgmental. You're not doing that. You're actually drawing from the field around your body and turning it into chemistry, and your field shrinks. But when you open your heart and you begin to breathe through that center and it's safe to open up, the field around your body can be 9 meters wide. That's science now. Now you're more energy and less matter. And that local phenomenon begins to have an effect on everybody that you've ever interacted with. So then we know that when people begin to unmemorize those emotional states and they lower the volume to them, the emotion is what's signaling the gene in the wrong way. And if the emotion is a record of the past, the moment the person overcomes that emotion, they're free now to create a new future. And according to the religious model, they're born again in the same life.
We have a power in our mind which is able to control what is happening in our body. Are we able to go into 100% power of our own brain, the seat of the mind? We are. Through the power of the will and intention, I thought to do things thought of impossible.
Yeah.
And like climbing Mount Everest in your shorts. If you know how to control it, you know how to control the extremes coming to you, not making you paranoid or full of anxiety, you are able to tap in and to find even the way where nothing is visible. 3 hours later, I found myself in an advanced base camp at 20,000 feet, received by Tibetans who saw a man in shorts coming out of the snow. Must be the Yeti,
right,
the snowman, or the Iceman, but actually it's the power of the mind which led me intuitively to the right place. So if you are able to do that, and you find yourself, then we are able to do a whole lot more. I went into the deepest. I activated it while being stressfully exposed to ice water on the skin. And normally you cannot do nothing. There's no breathing in the brain scan. You cannot move. It's nothing. Only you can use the power of your own brain, of your mind. And it showed I was making the skin temperature not going down while being exposed to ice water. So then they looked inside the brain, and then they saw on the surface the thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, the conscious brain, our thinking brain, go into the deepest part of the brain and robustly activating. So if you are able to go into the deepest, then you have done them all. You can go anywhere. And that is now the question. We are on the threshold of the power of the mind being accessible for every human in the world. When the first time people broke the record by going below 10 seconds, the next year 15 people could do it. It's morphology. We are connected. We only need to have this conviction now and this belief based on science. Hey, guys, you are able to take over the power of your own brain. It's here. Just invest into that and not invest into not being able to do that. We become immortal by understanding through the power of our own brain to connect with the soul. And because that sounds like hippie bullshit, that's why I go through science.
Right.
I take the brain surgeons, I take the neurologists, the immunologists, the biochemical professors, and hey, I challenge any scientist in the world, prove me wrong.
Yeah.
I think that we are here on this earth to prove that the soul is able to go through our conscious brain and become manifested. And that is the core. If we stay at the core, we grow into it. But no, this world is about, you got to serve the system. You got to serve the system who creates wars and stress and diseases and things that is normal and we cannot do anything. No, we can do all. We can bring peace and power to ourselves to become happy, strong, and healthy. And with that, the purpose of our lives, the soul itself. We are able to become happy What else do you want?
Right.
You don't want 6 cars or 10 houses and so many other things to compensate the loss of your security.
And scarcity.
Because you are happy.
Because you feel whole, because also you're healthy and you're strong, you're vibrant also as well.
Yes.
So you're not trying to necessarily have to take from somebody else or put anybody else down.
If you have eaten, you are not hungry anymore. If you are happy, you don't seek for compensation.
Right.
You're there and you emanate love.
When I interviewed you 5 years ago, I started doing the cold showers every morning. The most popular episode that we have in our show is my morning routine. And we always get people commenting on cold showers because they love everything else, but the cold showers is difficult. Where do people start with that, do you recommend? They don't have to do like 10 minutes in the beginning.
No. 30 seconds at the most. Don't go shockingly around with your physiology, with your body. No,
Right.
No shocking. It's just 30 seconds cold. And know that you are able to use the power of your mind. That we have a power in our mind which is able to control what is happening in our body. It's called interoceptive focus, and you can learn that right away. If your house is on fire, you run fast. You don't need no trigger. So that is a control of the adrenaline, and it's empowered by the adrenal axis, and it's moved inside of our brain. So if you learn to go into that part of the brain, you learn not only to go into the cold shower, you learn the power of your brain, of your mind, to learn to control. Once you learn to control, to go into the cold shower, the cold is only a mirror for, and it's good for your vascular system.
It's a teacher.
But the mind is being exercised. And that mind is then very much more able to oppose stress in daily life, in your business meetings, in your deadlines, in this and that. Because it's all about the physiology connected to the brain.
Right.
And you are in control.
Now, we have 3 brains that allow us to go from thinking to doing to being. Now, the first brain, the neocortex, it's the newest brain in evolution. It's that walnut-shaped structure that sits on the outside with all of its folds and valleys in yellow there. It's the newest, the most evolved and highly specialized in human beings. Right under the neocortex is called the limbic brain, the chemical brain, the emotional brain, or the mammalian brain. It's about the size of a lemon, and it's responsible for regulating internal chemical order. Right in the back of the brainstem there in red is called the cerebellum, the reptilian brain. It's the oldest brain in evolution. It's the seat of the subconscious mind. Now, your brain is made up of about 100 billion neurons. If you took 100 billion sheets of paper and stacked them on top of each other, it would be 5,000 miles high. That's the distance from Los Angeles to London. Now, nerve cells possess the unique ability to store and communicate information between each other. So your neocortex, your thinking brain, is the seat of your conscious awareness. You're listening to me right now with your neocortex. And what the neocortex loves to do is to gather information. And every time you learn something new, you make a new synaptic connection in your thinking brain. That's what learning is. Learning is forging new connections. And every time you learn something new, your brain physically changes. So you read a book on how to ride a bicycle, you read a book on how to build a doghouse, you read a book on how to dance the salsa, how to cook French cuisine, how to become successful, how to be a better parent. And your brain literally upscales its hardware to reflect a new level of mind. The principle in neuroscience says this: nerve cells that fire together wire together. And as you begin to learn new information, you biologically wire that information into your cerebral architecture. So if learning is making new synaptic connections, then remembering is maintaining and sustaining those connections. And just like any relationship, the more you communicate, the more bonded you become. And neurons are exactly the same way. Now, once these neurons begin to fire and wire together, they actually form networks. what neuroscientists call neural networks. Now, neural networks are just gangs of neurons that have fired and wired together to form a community of neurosynaptic connections. It could be related to an idea, a concept, a memory, experience, a skill or behavior and action. So you generate more electrical impulses in your brain in one day than all the cell phones on the planet put together. Now, the neuroscientific definition of mind is the brain in action. Mind is the brain at work. Mind is what the brain does. And because we have 100 billion neurons seamlessly pieced together, we can make the brain fire in different sequences, different patterns, and different combinations. And whenever we make the brain work differently, we're changing our mind. Now, when you're in the midst of an experience, everything you're seeing and smelling and tasting and feeling and hearing, all of your 5 senses are gathering this vital information from the environment. And as you begin to process all this information and it's rushing back to your brain, jungles of neurons begin to organize themselves into patterns. So experience then enriches the circuitry in your brain neurologically, but then it produces a chemical that's released in the second brain called the limbic brain or the emotional brain. So you can remember your first kiss. You can remember graduating from college. You can remember the birth of your first child. You can remember finishing a marathon. You can remember catching a fish off the coast of Mexico and then taking it home and cooking it and drinking some really good wine that tastes good and feeling the ocean breeze on your face and seeing the sunset. And we could say that you were altered from that experience. The problem is, you can't remember what you had for dinner the night before. That's because routine lulls the brain to sleep. Now, stress is when your body's knocked out of homeostasis. Stress is when your body's knocked out of balance. Now, when you see a lion, you begin to turn on a primitive nervous system. But it doesn't even have to be a lion. You could see your mother-in-law, and it produces the same exact effect. You can begin to think about certain things and auto-suggest, and you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. Now, your body is your unconscious mind. It does not know the difference between the actual experience in reality that produces the emotion and the emotion that you fabricate by thought alone. To the body, it believes it's in that experience. So the moment the limbic brain begins to make blend of neuropeptides, it begins to signal the hormonal centers, and you get a rush of energy to prepare you for this event, real or imagined. Now, the moment that happens, you become altered in some way. The fight or flight nervous system causes your pupils to dilate, your mouth gets a little dry, all of a sudden your heart rate begins to change, your respiratory rate changes, and blood is being sent to your extremities, and now you're prepared to either do battle with your mother-in-law or never go to the dinner. You begin to think about what you were thinking about. You begin to pay attention to how you're reacting. You begin to notice how you're feeling. And that concept in neuroscience is called metacognition. We can observe who we're being. And because we can observe who we're being, it means we could modify our behaviors to do a better job in life. So now the frontal lobe is the seat of your awareness. It's the home of the you and the me. And as you begin to think about who you no longer want to be, the frontal lobe acts like a volume control, and it begins to lower the volume in the circuits in your brain that are connected to the old self. And as it begins to silence those circuits that are connected to the old level of mind, that level of mind no longer fires, and you're observing it instead of participating in it. And as you begin to silence those circuits, nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wire together, and you begin to biologically break down the circuits in your brain that are connected to the old self and to the old mind. And as you begin to plan your actions and you begin to think about a new way of being and you begin to put yourself into the equation, your brain naturally begins to fire in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations. And whenever you make your brain work differently, you're changing your mind. because mind is the brain in action. And as the brain begins to fire in new ways and you produce a new level of mind, nerve cells that fire together wire together, and you begin to install the neurological hardware ahead of the actual experience. And now you have circuits in place to use when you get into that dinner. So now, as you ask yourself, what is compassion? And you begin to remember all these different things that you learned in the book, the frontal lobe, like a great symphony leader, begins to synchronize these circuits. And when it begins to produce a certain level of coherence, a certain level of mind, your brain naturally creates a hologram or an image. And that image then becomes the internal representation of what you are going to use when you walk into that dinner. We would call that intention. You begin to think about who you do want to be based on the knowledge you've learned, and you're priming your brain ahead of the actual experience. You walk into the dinner and you get your behaviors to match your intentions. You get your actions equal to your thoughts. You get your mind and body working together, and you do exactly what the book says. The moment that happens, all of a sudden, you feel compassion. Now, the moment your heart begins to open and you feel compassion, you are teaching your body emotionally to understand what your mind intellectually understood. And you're changing the fabric of you because you're instructing your body chemically to understand what your mind has intellectually and philosophically understood. But it's not enough to do it once. You can't forgive your mother-in-law one time and expect to be on the stained glass windows in church. You got to be able to repeat the experience. You got to be able to do it over and over again. You have to do it so many times that you no longer have to think about it. And when you do it over and over again, you neurochemically condition the body to memorize compassion as well as the conscious mind. And when that happens, when the mind and body are working together, or the body knows as well as the mind, you activate that third brain called the cerebellum. And so the way we transform the world is we transform ourselves. And when we're in that state of being, we give people permission to do the same. Thanks for listening.
They're priming their brain and beginning to lay down the circuitry for them to think in different ways. It's a process of repatterning. It's a process of rewiring. It's a process of reconditioning. It's a process of self-reflection and awareness and changing those beliefs. So by creating something for people to utilize, that you're not relying on so many things outside of you to bring you joy, or, this kind of subconscious program of being a victim. You say, Brian, why are you so upset today? Well, I'm upset because of this person or this thing. What that really means is that some person or some condition in your environment is controlling the way you're feeling and the way you're thinking. Well, if something is outside of you is controlling the way you feel and the way you think, you're a victim to your environment. And so then there is this dramatic polarity that goes on. When things are going well, you're happy. When things aren't going well, you're sad. But when you learn how to self-regulate and create more coherence in your brain and heart, and that's what our message is, then you're no longer dependent on your outer world controlling your mood. In fact, you begin to realize how you think and feel begins to produce effects in your outer life. Now you start believing more you're the creator of your life and less of the victim of your life. Now that isn't something that you take one bite of and swallow and it's all over. It's a process of repatterning. It's a process of rewiring. It's a process of reconditioning. It's a process of self-reflection and awareness and changing those beliefs. And that's the work. And yet people are doing it. So when you begin to realize then, well, I can't respond to the same conditions in my life with the same emotions and the same thoughts, because if I believe that the way I feel and the way I think creates reality, if I'm reacting to the same thoughts and feelings equal to the conditions in my life in the same way, then I keep reaffirming the same life. So then a person has to retreat from their life, retreat from their environment, disconnect from their outer world, and begin to lay down patterns neurologically in their brain so that their brain is no longer a record of the past. They're priming their brain and beginning to lay down the circuitry for them to think in different ways, to begin to close their eyes and rehearse who they're going to be in that day. And the act of mentally rehearsing begins to install the neurological hardware in their brain. So their brain looks like the experience is already happening or has already happened. Now the brain's no longer a record of the past. Now we're creating a map to the future. Now
it's practicing gratitude before it happens.
Well, now the emotion.
Right.
Now, so then the action of rehearsal and installing the neurological hardware, by firing and wiring the same circuitry, the hardware becomes a software program, which means you're going to start automatically acting like a different person. You're going to start automatically thinking in new ways. And then to trade guilt or anxiety or aggression or hatred or anger, to say those are emotions of the past, and as long as I live by these emotions, those emotions are influencing my thoughts. If emotions are a record of the past, then I'm thinking in the past, so my past is going to be my future. So if I want to be wealthy, I can't bring lack. If I want to be happy, I can't bring pain. Well, so then let's get beyond the emotion. So by trading those limited survival emotions and teaching people how to elevate their emotional state and really measure to tell them you're doing it or you're not doing it. When you teach your body emotionally what that future is going to feel like, and you say, I'm not going to get up until I feel this feeling and I'm locked into that feeling. Well, the side effect of that is, let's just say that you can contact the emotions of your future. And you teach your body what it feels like emotionally. The joy, the gratitude, the appreciation, the love for life, the joy for existence, the inspiration. And, most people do that in the beginning. They feel kind of funny, like, why am I doing this? Because they've been hypnotized and conditioned to need a reason to feel that. Right. Something outside of them has got to change how they feel inside of them. So they spend their whole life in lack and emptiness waiting for it to happen, but living in lack isn't going to create it.
So you're front loading it, and that feels weird at first.
At first, but if you start understanding what you're doing and why you're doing it, and the stronger the emotion you feel, the more you're going to pay attention to the picture in your mind. You begin to remember your future. You are branding that circuitry in your brain, and now you're emotionally conditioning your body into the future. Now, here's the side effect of that. If you can do that properly and become familiar with those states of mind and body, and you get up feeling like your future has already happened, I guarantee you're going to stop looking for it. I guarantee you're going to stop analyzing why it hasn't happened. You're going to feel like it has already happened. Now, the work is to be able to maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day. You got to be able to sustain that state independent of your coworkers, independent of your boss, independent of your ex, independent of your finances, independent of the traffic. And if you're able to do that, you will begin to see the feedback in your life. In a sense, when energy makes it to the heart, it begins to broaden the field around the body. An energy that's literally measurable, a magnetic field. And that energy is a frequency. And that frequency can carry the thought of your health, of your wealth, of your freedom, of your new relationship, of your new job. The frequency or the emotion of suffering can't carry the thought of health. It can't carry the thought of your new future. So then when there's a vibrational match between the energy, because we're always emitting energy and information, when there's a vibrational match between your energy and some possibility that exists in the quantum field, something magical happens, because once energy makes it to your heart, you're creating from the field instead of from matter. Now this weird thing starts to happen and things start coming to you. Now you don't have to rush anywhere to get it. You're not creating a matter to matter from three-dimensional reality to three-dimensional reality. That takes time. You're creating from the field, and it's the field that creates matter. So all of a sudden you start seeing things coming to you. When you see that, and you start to see that they're coming in unusual ways that surprise you, you're going to begin to wake up to the fact that you're probably more the creator of your life and less of the victim of your life. So teaching people how to do that, and then be able to become studious, to become the scientists in their life, to measure the effects of them at cause. Whatever's going on in the news, whatever's going on in the media, whatever's going on, it's incidental to the fact that now they're beginning to make great strides. So, but people come, for all kinds of reasons to our work. They come to get healthy, they come to get wealthy, they come to have a relationship, they come for a mystical experience. But I now know they really come for wholeness. And when you feel so whole because your brain is so orderly and so coherent, and you've trained your heart to be more in coherence, and you feel that kind of joy for no reason at all. This is where it gets interesting, because now all of a sudden you're no longer seduced by the conditions in your outer world. In fact, you're seeing the hidden meaning behind everything because you're viewing it from a greater level of consciousness. So sitting in the fire of your guilt, sitting in the fire of your pain, and knowing what to do when that happens, and teaching people that as they begin to lower the volume to those emotions, as they begin to self-regulate, that's the greatest challenge they have in their lives. I mean, people say to me, what do you do in the morning? Well, 2 hours in the morning, that's a lot of time. Well, if I can overcome myself at the beginning of the day, the rest of my day is easy.
And
right?
That's what you do. You spend 2 hours in the morning.
I allow for 2 hours.
Okay. You still get up at 4 a.m. and that.
Well, this morning I was up at 3.
Okay.
Because I'm on the wrong time zone.
Right.
But if I'm up,
you like the 4 a.m. slot
because my brain waves are just right. I don't have to work as hard. Yeah, my body's a little fatigued, but I'm between worlds, and so my body's a little tired, but I get up and do it. And to me, I allow for 2 hours. Sometimes I can nail it in 45 minutes or an hour, and sure, I'm done. Other times, I'm on the wrong time zone. I have meetings all day long. I got a lot going on, and I'm just not going to fall prey to that common state of thinking.
And that looks like meditation, affirmations in your mind, visualization.
It's the work that we do. It's the work that we do. And the first part in truly creating a new personal reality is overcoming your present personality. You got to get beyond the normal thinking patterns, the normal urges of action and habits, to get beyond certain emotions that are residuals from the day before. That's the work right there. That's the part you have to overcome. So some days you just kind of slip in and it's magic because you've been practicing, like having a great golf game or a great tennis game or a great run or a great session of knitting. You're in your groove. Other days you got to work a little bit more for it. And for me, what I've learned is those hard days, the days that are the most challenging, are always the most rewarding, because now you're uncompromising to an outcome. And if it takes you an hour to get beyond yourself, to find the present moment, because that's the only place where the unknown exists, the familiar emotions and hardwired patterns of the past are the known. The predictable future, in trying to forecast the feeling of every event in our life, people do unconsciously, is also the known. There's only one place where the unknown exists, and that's the present moment.
You call it the generous present moment.
Yeah, and I've just done it enough times, and there are plenty of people in our work that have done it enough times to know when you're there and when you're not.
Okay.
And when you're not, it's very obvious because you've been there enough times. So
you're separating your old story from yourself, and you're separating your focus on the future, and you're being present.
It's just like hitting a tennis ball in a sweet spot. You lock into something, and that wholeness starts to happen, and now you're no longer creating from polarity or duality or opposites. People they create when they see they don't have something. Whether, hey, nice suit, I want one of those, right? And the moment I see that you have a nice suit and I start thinking, I want one of those, my brain naturally starts putting me in the equation. Next thing you know, I'm wearing your suit. Well, that's because we're wired to do that. So then we have this natural ability to create. The problem is after you imagine that, you open your eyes and you don't have it, people experience more lack. Well, we're not that good yet. So then the act of practicing enough times and beginning to create the state in which you're so connected to the energy of your future. Now think about this. You're so connected to the energy of your future, you're no longer looking for it or waiting for it. You feel like it's already happened. The moment you get upset in traffic, the moment you start judging a coworker, you just disconnected from the energy of your future, and now you're back to the energy of your past. Now, If you tell me it was that person that did it to you, I'd say to you, oh, you're back to the unconscious program of being a victim again. So then the person then goes, oh, when did I fall from, that state? When did I lose it? Oh, it happened at 3 o'clock today. The next time that happens, what can I do differently? Now the person's moving through their challenges in their life with coherence, with rhythm. They're starting to begin to make strides, and that they're no longer knee-jerking to the people in their life that they've used emotionally to reaffirm their identity. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people that have healed themselves from all kinds of health conditions, and one of the most important elements that I see over and over again is when the person said, I just got to this point in my life where I made up my mind. And they made a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carried a level of energy that was greater than the hardwired programs in their brain and the emotional conditioning in their body to the past. And their body responded to their mind in that instant. And the stronger the emotion, or the stronger the intensity of that energy, the stronger they felt that energy, they came out of the resting state, the more they paid attention to the choice they were making.
Right. So like the decision might be, I'm not going to let my ex-wife bother me anymore. I'm going to no longer get angry.
Yeah, we had a woman on the stage in our event just recently, 78-year-old woman, very serious car accident, in a wheelchair, couldn't walk, couldn't speak. Made up her mind, like, this is it. I am here to change. It wasn't like 50% in, I hope this works. She was like, I made up my mind, and the decision became a moment in time that she never forgot. She will say to you, I know the moment I made up my mind. I know the moment I decided to change. That, think about it, that is the moment she moved her brain and body from the past present reality into a future present reality. What do I mean by that? People wake up in the morning and they don't feel anything, and all of a sudden their brain is a record of the past. They start thinking about all their problems, and those problems are memories of certain people and objects and things at certain times and places. So the moment they start remembering their problems, they're thinking in the past. Well, every one of those problems has an emotion associated with it. So they start feeling unhappy, they start feeling discouraged, they start feeling victimized. Now their body's in the past. And if how you think and how you feel creates your state of being, that person's starting their day with their entire state of being in the past. So if they're living in the familiar past and they're in the known, they're going to crave the predictable future. So they're going to run through a series of routine behaviors in their day, and they're going to want to know the feeling of every experience in their life. Well, if you can predict the feeling of every experience in your life, that's more of the known. So now, the person who's now living in that future known reality, how are they going to change? Well, the moment you make a decision and you come out of your resting state and you begin to say, I don't care what's going on in my life, environment. I don't care what people think, environment. I don't care how I feel, body. I don't care how long it takes, time. I'm going to do this. And the hair on the back of your neck stands up. That's a new electrochemical signal to the body. This is the body saying, he's serious this time. It's no longer, oh geez, I think I'm going to change tomorrow. Right. This is a strong signal. And that becomes a long-term memory. That moment defines the person. So then the stronger the emotion, if the emotion of inspiration is greater than the emotion of suffering from the past experience, the stronger the emotion they feel, the more they pay attention to the picture in their mind. We could say they're remembering their future, and they're beginning to brand that circuitry in their brain and send a new emotional signature to their body. And in a sense, they're creating a coherent, clear intention with an elevated, coherent heart emotion, and now they're broadcasting a whole new signature, and that's dropping a big stone in a very placid lake, and here come the waves. That's moving right out into reality, and the person is beginning to change their energy, and nobody changes until they change their energy.